On a sweltering morning, Marcus Thompson, a black engineer out of work, clutched his folder of documents and rushed toward the final job interview that could save his life. Suddenly, a luxury car on the roadside broke down, and a desperate billionaire woman called out for help. Marcus couldn't bring himself to ignore her and rushed over, his hands quickly covered in grease as time slipped away without mercy. When the engine finally roared back to life, Marcus smiled, only to realize he had just sacrificed his one chance at a future. He had no idea that this seemingly foolish act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would transform his entire life in ways he never could have imagined. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Marcus Thompson's worn sneakers hit the cracked sidewalk in a rhythm that matched his racing heart. The manila folder pressed against his chest felt heavier with each step, like it was absorbing all his desperation and turning it into weight. His breath came out in short bursts as he pushed forward, weaving between people who seemed to have nowhere urgent to be. "God, please," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the bus stop ahead. "Just let today be different." The morning air was cold, but sweat dampened his collar anyway. Marcus had been walking this same route for months now, but today felt different. Today had to be different. He couldn't afford another rejection, another closed door, another sympathetic smile that meant nothing. He remembered with a sharpness that hurt when he used to drive to work. A sleek sedan, leather seats, the smell of new car mixed with his cologne. Marcus Thompson, top of his engineering class. Marcus Thompson, lead petroleum engineer at Continental Energy Solutions. That version of himself felt like a character from someone else's story now. 5 years ago, he'd walked into that company's headquarters like he owned the place. In a way, he had. His designs had saved them millions. His innovations had pushed their efficiency ratings through the roof. The CEO had shaken his hand at the annual dinner and told him he was the future of the company. Marcus's jaw clenched. The future. What a joke. He'd met Clara at that same dinner. She'd been working in corporate communications, and when she smiled at him across the banquet hall, everything else had faded away. She was beautiful, sure, but it was more than that. She'd looked at him like he was somebody, like he mattered. They'd gotten married 18 months later. A small ceremony, nothing fancy, but Clara had been radiant. She'd whispered in his ear during their first dance that she couldn't wait to build a life with him, and Marcus had believed every word. The bus stop was just ahead now. Marcus slowed his pace, trying to catch his breath. He couldn't show up to job interviews looking like he'd just run a marathon. First impressions right, that's what all the career advice websites said. As if a pressed collar and a firm handshake could somehow compensate for being unemployed for 8 months. 8 months. It felt like 8 years. Continental Energy Solutions had gone down fast. One day, everything was fine. The next federal investigators were walking through the offices, and the news was breaking stories about fraud at the executive level. Marcus had nothing to do with it, of course. He was just an engineer keeping his head down doing his work. But when the company collapsed, it took everyone with it. The severance package had been laughable. 2 months' salary and a half-hearted letter of recommendation from a VP who'd already lined up his next position at a competitor. Marcus had tried to stay positive at first. He was good at what he did. Someone would hire him. The industry was always looking for talented engineers, right wrong. Turns out, when a company goes down in flames amid scandal, everyone associated with it gets burned. It didn't matter that Marcus's name had never appeared in any of the investigations. It didn't matter that his work had been exemplary. He was tainted by association, and in a competitive job market, that was enough. The rejections had started polite. "We've decided to go in a different direction. Your qualifications are impressive, but we found a better fit. We'll keep your resume on file." Then they'd stopped being polite. They'd just stopped responding altogether. Marcus reached the bus stop and leaned against the shelter, his folder still clutched to his chest. An older woman was already waiting her shopping bags at her feet. She glanced at him, then away quickly. Marcus was used to that look. He knew what he looked like these days, desperate, tired, a man, barely holding it together. His phone buzzed in his pocket. For a second, hope flared in his chest. Maybe it was a callback. Maybe someone had actually looked at his resume and seen his potential instead of his misfortune. He pulled out the phone. It was Clara. "Where are you?" Her voice was sharp before he could even say hello. "At the bus stop. I'm going to—" "You know we need milk. You were supposed to pick it up yesterday." Marcus closed his eyes. Clara, I'm on my way to drop off applications. I can get milk on the way back. Applications. The word dripped with contempt. You've been dropping off applications for months, Marcus. Months. And what do we have to show for it? Nothing. I'm trying, he said quietly, aware of the woman at the bus stop, pretending not to listen. I'm doing everything I can. Well, it's not enough, is it? Clara's voice rose. We're about to lose the apartment. The apartment, Marcus. Do you understand that we're going to be on the street, and you're still walking around with your little folder like some college graduate looking for his first job? That's not fair, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. How could he argue when she was right? Nothing he did was working. Fair. Clara laughed, a bitter sound that made his stomach turn. You want to talk about fair. Is it fair that I married an engineer, and now I'm living like we're in poverty? Is it fair that I can't even afford to get my hair done, can't go out with my friends, can't have any kind of life because you lost your job? I didn't choose to lose it, Marcus said, his knuckles white around the phone. The company went bankrupt. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to be better than this. Clara's voice had gone cold now, which was somehow worse than the yelling. You were supposed to be someone I could depend on. Instead, you're pathetic, Marcus. You're absolutely pathetic. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment, Clara's words echoing in his head. Pathetic. When had she started seeing him that way? When had the woman who'd promised to stand by him through anything turned into this stranger who could barely stand to look at him? He knew the answer, though. It had been gradual, like watching paint peel. First came the worried looks when he came home empty-handed from job fairs. Then the disappointed sighs when he told her about another rejection. Then the complaints about money, about sacrifices, about the life she was supposed to have, the life he was supposed to provide. They'd sold his car first. That had hurt, but Marcus had understood the necessity. They needed the money to stay afloat. Clara had cried when the buyer drove it away, and Marcus had held her, promising it was temporary. They'd get through this together. Then they'd sold her jewelry. Then the furniture they'd saved up for. Then they'd moved out of their nice apartment in the city center to this place on the outskirts where the rent was cheap because nothing worked quite right and the neighbors kept irregular hours. With each sacrifice, Clara had grown harder, more bitter. The woman who used to kiss him goodbye in the morning now barely looked at him. The woman who used to believe in him now treated him like a burden she couldn't wait to shed. The bus pulled up brakes, squealing. Marcus climbed on, dropped his fare in the slot, and found a seat near the back. The folder was still pressed against his chest, though he wasn't sure why he bothered holding it so carefully anymore. Inside were copies of his resume, his references, his certifications. All the proof that he used to be somebody. Used to be. Past tense. That's what his life had become, a series of things that used to be true. He used to be successful. He used to be respected. He used to have a wife who loved him. Marcus pressed his forehead against the window as the bus lurched forward. The city rolled past, full of people heading to jobs they had, lives they were living. He felt like a ghost passing through a world he no longer belonged to. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. He barely recognized himself anymore. The confidence was gone. The spark in his eyes had dulled. He looked tired, defeated, pathetic, just like Clara said. God, he whispered again, his breath fogging the window. I know I haven't been perfect. I know I've made mistakes. But please, please just give me a chance. Just one break. That's all I'm asking for. The bus continued its route, and Marcus continued his silent prayer, clutching his folder full of yesterday's achievements, hoping desperately that somewhere, somehow, today would be the day everything changed. He had no idea how right he was. The apartment was still dark when Marcus's phone rang at 6:30 in the morning. He'd been awake for an hour already, staring at the ceiling, listening to Clara's steady breathing beside him. They didn't talk much anymore, not even in bed. The silence had become its own presence in their marriage, heavy and suffocating. The phone buzzed against the nightstand, loud in the quiet room. Marcus grabbed it quickly, not wanting to wake Clara. She'd been up late last night, scrolling through social media, looking at photos of her friends' vacations and new purchases, her face growing darker with each swipe. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. Marcus's heart jumped. Unknown numbers meant possibilities. They meant someone might actually want to talk to him about a job instead of sending another automated rejection email. He slipped out of bed and into the hallway before answering. Hello? Is this Marcus Thompson? The voice was professional, female, efficient. Yes, this is Marcus. Mr. Thompson, this is Jennifer Cole from Metro Pro Chemicals PLC. We received your application for the senior petroleum engineer position. Marcus's breath caught. Metro Pro Chemicals. He'd sent them his resume 3 weeks ago and heard nothing back. He'd assumed it had gone into the same black hole as all the others. Yes, I remember, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Thank you for calling. We'd like to bring you in for an interview. Would you be available this morning at 8 o'clock? This morning? Marcus's mind raced. It was already 6:30. Metro Pro Chemicals was on the other side of the city, easily an hour away by bus, maybe more, depending on traffic. 8 o'clock would be perfect, he heard himself say. I'll be there. Excellent. Ask for me at the front desk when you arrive. We'll see you at 8, Mr. Thompson. The call ended and Marcus stood in the hallway, his phone clutched in his hand, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. Metro Pro Chemicals, one of the biggest chemical companies in the region. They wanted to interview him. Today, in less than 90 minutes, he rushed back into the bedroom. Clara was awake now, sitting up in bed, her hair messy, her eyes still puffy with sleep. Who was that? She asked, her tone already suspicious, like she expected bad news, because bad news was all they ever got anymore. Metro Pro Chemicals, Marcus said, and he couldn't keep the excitement out of his voice. They want to interview me. This morning. At 8. Clara's expression didn't change. Metro Pro Chemicals. They're huge, Clara, massive. If I could get a position there. How are you getting downtown by 8? She glanced at the clock. It's already 6:30. I'll take the bus. I'll make it work. The bus? Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. The bus that's always late. The bus that breaks down every other week. That bus. I don't have a choice, Marcus said, already pulling clothes from the closet. This is the best opportunity I've had in months. I have to try. Sure, Clara said, lying back down and pulling the covers up. You do that. Try. Like you've been trying. Let me know how it works out. Her words stung, but Marcus didn't have time to argue. He dressed quickly, choosing his best shirt, the one he saved for interviews. It was getting worn at the collar, but it was still presentable. Professional. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and tried to see what an employer might see. Reliable. Experienced. Desperate. No, not desperate. Confident. He had to project confidence. You look fine, he told his reflection. You can do this. Clara was still in bed when he left, her back turned to the door. Marcus wanted to kiss her goodbye, to feel some connection to the woman he'd married, but he knew she wouldn't welcome it. So he just closed the door quietly behind him and headed out into the morning. The bus stop was already crowded. Marcus checked his phone. 7 o'clock. He had 60 minutes to get across the city. It was tight, but possible. The bus usually took 45 minutes, which would give him 15 minutes to find the building and get to the right floor. The bus arrived 10 minutes late. Marcus climbed on his folder pressed against his chest. Again, his heart already starting to race. 10 minutes late meant 10 minutes less cushion. But it was fine. He could still make it. He had to make it. The bus pulled away from the curb and Marcus found a seat, his eyes fixed on his phone. 7:15. The interview was in 45 minutes. The bus would get him there by 8, maybe a few minutes after, but close enough. Close enough that they wouldn't hold it against him. Please God, he thought. Please let this work out. The bus moved through the morning traffic at a crawl. Marcus watched the streets pass each block, feeling like it took an eternity. His leg bounced nervously, his fingers tapping against the folder. Around him, other passengers read newspapers, scrolled through phones, dozed against windows. Nobody else seemed worried about time. Nobody else's entire future was riding on making it to an appointment on time. Then the bus stopped, not at a bus stop. Just stopped in the middle of the street, surrounded by cars on all sides. Marcus leaned forward, trying to see what was happening. Ahead, the traffic was completely gridlocked. Red brake lights stretched as far as he could see. Nothing was moving. Attention passengers, the driver announced over the intercom. We're experiencing heavy traffic due to an accident ahead. We'll be moving again as soon as possible. Marcus's stomach dropped. He checked his phone. 7:30. He had 30 minutes to get to Metro Pro Chemicals and the bus wasn't moving. The minutes crawled by. 7:35. 7:40. The bus hadn't moved an inch. Marcus stood up and made his way to the front. Excuse me, how long do you think we'll be stuck here? The driver shrugged. Could be 10 minutes, could be an hour. No way to know with these accidents. An hour. Marcus looked out the windshield at the sea of stopped cars. He was still 20 minutes away from Metro Pro Chemicals, and the bus wasn't going anywhere. "Is there a stop nearby?" Marcus asked. "Somewhere I could get off." "Next stop's 3 blocks back," the driver said. "But I can't reverse." Marcus looked at the gridlock around them, then at his phone. 7:45. If he stayed on this bus, he'd miss the interview. There was no question about it. But if he got off now, if he walked, it was at least 4 miles to Metro Pro Chemicals, maybe more. But at least he'd be moving. At least he'd have a chance. "Can you open the door?" Marcus asked. The driver looked at him like he was crazy. "We're in the middle of traffic." "I know, but I have somewhere I need to be. Please." Something in Marcus's voice must have convinced him, because the driver sighed and pressed the button. The doors hissed open. "Good luck," the driver said. "You're gonna need it." Marcus stepped off the bus and into the street. Cars honked immediately, drivers yelling at him to get out of the way. He squeezed between bumpers his folder held over his head and made it to the sidewalk. 7:47, 13 minutes to get 4 miles. It was impossible. Marcus knew it was impossible, but he started running anyway. Marcus's lungs burned. The morning sun was already hot, and sweat soaked through his shirt as he pushed himself forward. His dress shoes weren't made for running, and he could feel blisters forming on his heels with each stride, but he couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. The streets were busy with morning commuters, and Marcus dodged around them, his folder still clutched in one hand. People stared at him, this sweating, desperate man in business clothes sprinting down the sidewalk like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. He checked his phone without slowing down. 7:52. 8 minutes until his interview. He'd covered maybe a mile, which meant he still had 3 to go. The math was brutal and unforgiving. Marcus cut down a side street, hoping for a shortcut. The neighborhood here was quieter residential, with tree-lined sidewalks and nice houses set back from the road. Nobody was out this early, except for a few people walking dogs or heading to their cars. That's when he heard it. "Excuse me, hello." The voice was soft, uncertain. Female. Marcus almost kept running. He didn't have time to stop. He didn't have time for anything except getting to Metro Pro Chemicals. But something made him slow down, made him turn around. A woman stood next to a car on the side of the road. An expensive car Marcus noticed automatically, sleek and black, and probably worth more than he'd made in a year, back when he was actually making money. The hood was up and the woman was standing beside it, looking lost and worried. She was in her early 30s, Marcus guessed, white with blonde hair pulled back in a professional style. She wore a business suit that probably cost more than his rent, and even from a distance, Marcus could tell she was wealthy. Everything about her screamed money and success, and a life that was going exactly according to plan. "Please," she called out when she saw him looking. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my car broke down, and I don't know anything about cars, and there's nobody else around." Marcus looked at her, then at his phone. 7:54. 6 minutes. "I'm really sorry," he called back, "but I'm late for something important. I'm sure someone else will come along." He started to turn away, but her voice stopped him. "Please, I'm begging you. I have a meeting, and if I miss it, I'll lose a deal I've been working on for months. I know you're in a hurry. I can see that. But I'm desperate, and you're the only person here." There was real fear in her voice. Marcus looked at her again. Really looked at her this time. She wasn't just worried. She was scared. Her hands were shaking slightly and her eyes were wide. "I don't know anything about fixing cars," she continued, talking faster now. "My driver called in sick this morning, and I thought I could drive myself. But now this happened, and I'm alone, and I don't know what to do." Marcus stood frozen on the sidewalk. Every logical part of his brain was screaming at him to keep running. He had 6 minutes to get to the most important interview of his life. 6 minutes to save his marriage, his future, everything he'd been fighting for. This woman's problems weren't his problems, but she was looking at him with such hope, such desperate need for help. And he knew what it felt like to be desperate. He knew what it felt like to need someone, anyone, to just give you a chance. "Please," she said again, softer now. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't terrified of being stuck here alone. This neighborhood might look safe, but you never know. And I need help." Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about Clara, about her bitter words that morning, about the apartment they were about to lose, about the life that kept slipping through his fingers, no matter how hard he tried to hold on. Then he thought about the kind of man he used to be, the man who helped people, The man who did the right thing, even when it was hard. Was he still that man, or had months of rejection and failure and Clara's contempt beaten it out of him? He opened his eyes and looked at his phone one more time. 7:56. 4 minutes. Then he walked toward the woman and her expensive, broken-down car. "Okay," he said, "let me take a look." The relief on her face was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh my God, thank you. Thank you so much." "I'm Marcus," he said, already moving to the front of the car, his eyes scanning the engine. "Charlotte," she said, "Charlotte Whitmore, and I can't tell you how grateful I am." Marcus barely heard her. He was already focused on the car, his engineering brain automatically analyzing the problem. It didn't matter if it was petroleum processing equipment or a car engine mechanical systems, followed the same basic principles. He checked the obvious things first. Battery connections looked fine. No visible leaks. Nothing obviously broken. Then he noticed the air filter housing was slightly loose, and one of the sensor connections had come unplugged. "When did it start having problems?" he asked, already reaching in to reconnect the sensor. "About 10 minutes ago," Charlotte said. "It just started making a weird noise, and then died completely. I managed to pull over, but then it wouldn't start again." Marcus found the problem quickly. A combination of the loose sensor and a clogged fuel line. Simple fix, really. 5 minutes of work, maybe less. He just had to reconnect everything properly and clear the blockage. His hands moved automatically, years of engineering training taking over. Behind him, Charlotte watched, nervously checking her own phone every few seconds. "You really know what you're doing?" she said, sounding surprised. "I'm an engineer," Marcus said without thinking. Then he corrected himself. "I was an engineer. I'm between jobs right now." "Oh," Charlotte's voice was sympathetic. "I'm sorry. That must be hard." Marcus didn't respond. He was focused on finishing the repair. 7:58, 2 minutes until his interview. He'd already missed it. There was no way he could make it now. But at least he could finish what he'd started here. At least he could help this one person. "Try starting it now," he said, stepping back from the engine. Charlotte got in the car and turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. "Oh my God!" She jumped out of the car, her face lit up with joy. "You did it. You actually fixed it." "Just a loose connection and a minor blockage," Marcus said, wiping his hands on his already sweaty shirt. "Should be fine now." "I don't know how to thank you," Charlotte said. She pulled out her wallet. "Please let me pay you." "How much?" "No," Marcus said quickly. "That's not necessary. But you helped me when you were clearly in a hurry." She looked at him more carefully now, taking in his business clothes, his sweaty face, his obvious distress. "Where were you going your interview?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in his throat. 8 o'clock. He'd missed it. "Oh no." Charlotte's face fell. "Oh no, and you stopped to help me. Where is it? Maybe I can drive you. It's the least I can do after—" "It's across town," Marcus said. "And it started at 8. I'm already late, but thank you for the offer." "Are you sure I could try to explain to them, tell them it was my fault?" "It's okay," Marcus said, even though it wasn't okay, even though nothing was okay. "I made a choice. That's on me." Charlotte looked like she wanted to argue, but Marcus was already backing away. If he stood here any longer, he was going to break down, and he couldn't do that in front of a stranger. "Good luck with your meeting," he said. "Wait, at least let me get your number. I want to thank you properly, maybe buy you dinner or—" But Marcus was already walking away, his folder still pressed against his chest, heading in the direction of Metro Pro Chemicals, even though he knew it was pointless now. Behind him, Charlotte stood by her running car, watching him go, with an expression of concern and guilt. "Such a kind man," she whispered to herself. "I hope helping me doesn't cause him too much trouble." She had no idea how much trouble it would cause. Neither of them did. Marcus stood in front of Metro Pro Chemicals' towering glass building at 8:27, 27 minutes late. He'd run most of the remaining distance, his lungs screaming, his legs shaking, but he'd kept going because what else could he do? Give up, go home to Clara, and admit he'd failed before he'd even tried. The building was impressive, all steel and glass reaching toward the sky. Through the front windows, Marcus could see a pristine lobby with marble floors and modern furniture. This was the kind of place where successful people worked, the kind of place he used to belong. He took a moment to catch his breath and straighten his shirt. The fabric was wrinkled and damp with sweat. His hair was a mess. He looked exactly like what he was, a desperate man who'd run 4 miles in dress shoes. But he was here. That had to count for something. Marcus pushed through the revolving door and into the air-conditioned lobby. The cool air hit his sweaty skin, making him shiver. Behind a sleek reception desk, a woman in her 40s looked up at him. Her expression went from professional smile to something colder the moment she saw him. "Can I help you?" Her tone made it clear she wasn't sure she wanted to. "I have an interview," Marcus said, trying to sound confident despite his appearance. "With Jennifer Cole. My name is Marcus Thompson." The receptionist's eyes narrowed slightly. She typed something into her computer, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the keys. "Your interview was scheduled for 8 o'clock, she said, not looking up from the screen. "I know. I'm sorry I'm late. There was an accident and traffic was completely stopped, and I had to." "Mr. Thompson." Now she did look up, and her eyes were hard. "Your interview was scheduled for 8 o'clock. It is now 8:28. That's 28 minutes late." "I understand that, but if I could just explain—" "There's nothing to explain." The receptionist's voice was sharp, cutting through his words like a knife. "Metro Pro Chemicals is a professional organization. We expect professionalism from our candidates. Showing up nearly half an hour late to an interview demonstrates a complete lack of respect for our time and a fundamental inability to manage your own schedule." Marcus felt his face flush. "Ma'am, I was on a bus that got stuck in traffic. There was nothing I could—" "I don't care about your excuses, Mr. Thompson." She folded her hands on the desk, looking at him like he was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "Everyone faces challenges. Everyone deals with traffic and unexpected problems. Successful people plan for those contingencies. They leave early. They prepare. They don't show up late with excuses." "I left with plenty of time," Marcus said, his voice rising despite himself. "I couldn't have known." "You should have known." The receptionist's tone was final, absolute. "You should have prepared better. And frankly, if you can't even manage to arrive on time for the most important meeting of your career, how can we trust you to handle the responsibilities of a senior position?" The words hit Marcus like physical blows. She was right in a way. He should have left earlier. He should have planned better. But he'd helped someone. "Didn't that count for anything, please?" he said, and he hated how the word came out small and desperate. "Is there any way I could still meet with Miss Cole? I promise I'm qualified, if you just look at my resume." "Your resume is irrelevant if you can't demonstrate basic professional standards." The receptionist stood up, her body language making it clear the conversation was over. "Metro Pro Chemicals does not accept mediocrity, Mr. Thompson. We certainly don't accept incompetence. I think it's best if you leave now." Marcus stood there, his folder still pressed against his chest, staring at this woman who'd just destroyed his last real hope. He wanted to argue, to make her understand, to somehow convince her that he deserved a chance. But he could see in her eyes that it wouldn't matter. She'd already decided who he was. A loser. A failure, someone not worth her time. "I'm sorry for wasting your time," he heard himself say. "So am I." She sat back down, already looking at her computer screen, dismissing him completely. "Goodbye, Mr. Thompson." Marcus turned and walked back toward the revolving door. Each step felt heavier than the last. Behind him, he could feel the receptionist's judgmental gaze on his back. Around the lobby, other people in professional clothes glanced at him and then quickly away, like failure might be contagious. He pushed through the door and back out into the heat. The morning sun was bright now, almost blinding. Marcus walked to the edge of the building and leaned against the wall, his legs finally giving out. He slid down until he was sitting on the concrete, his head in his hands. "God," he whispered, "what did I do wrong? I was just trying to help someone. I was just trying to do the right thing." But the universe didn't answer. The city continued around him, busy and indifferent. People walked past, heading to jobs they had, lives that were working out. Nobody stopped to ask if he was okay. Nobody cared about the man sitting against the building with his whole world falling apart. Marcus pulled out his phone. He should call Clara. He should tell her what happened. But what would he say? That he'd missed the interview because he'd stopped to help a stranger fix her car. That his kindness had cost them their last real chance at stability. She'd never understand. She'd never forgive him. He almost wished he could go back to that moment on the street. Almost wished he'd just kept running, had ignored Charlotte's plea for help, had chosen himself over a stranger. Would that have made him a bad person, or would it have just made him smart? His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "How did it go?" Marcus stared at the message. How did it go? How could he possibly answer that question? His thumbs hovered over the keyboard, then fell away. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not when he still had to figure out how to go home and face her. Not when he still had to find a way to explain that his kindness, the one thing he'd always prided himself on, had just destroyed their last hope. Marcus put his phone away and stood up. His legs were shaky and his feet hurt from the run, but he started walking. Away from Metro Pro Chemicals, away from his failure. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay here staring at the building that had rejected him, thinking about all the ways his life had gone wrong. Somewhere in the city, Charlotte Whitmore was probably in her meeting, probably closing her deal, probably grateful to the kind stranger who'd helped her. She had no idea what her broken-down car had cost him. And Marcus, walking through the hot morning with his useless resume folder, wondered if kindness was really a virtue or just another word for being a fool. Marcus didn't go straight home. He couldn't. Instead, he walked for hours through the city, his feet blistering in his dress shoes, his shirt sticking to his back in the afternoon heat. He walked until the sun started to set, until his phone died from Clara's unanswered calls, until the exhaustion in his body almost matched the exhaustion in his soul. When he finally made it back to the apartment, it was almost 6 o'clock. The building looked shabbier than usual in the evening light with its peeling paint and cracked concrete steps. This was what their life had become, cheap, broken, barely holding together. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt like walking toward an execution. He could imagine Clara waiting inside her anger building with every hour he'd been gone, every call he hadn't answered. She'd want an explanation. She'd want to know why he'd disappeared, and he'd have to tell her the truth. The apartment door was unlocked. Marcus pushed it open and found Clara sitting on their worn couch, her arms crossed, her face set in an expression of cold fury. "Where have you been?" Her voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than if she'd been yelling. "I've been calling you all day." "My phone died," Marcus said, closing the door behind him. "Don't." Clara stood up. "Don't do that. Don't give me some simple excuse like that answers anything." "Where were you, Marcus? How did the interview go?" Marcus set his folder down on the table, the folder that had been pressed against his chest all day, that had absorbed his sweat and his desperation and his failure. "I didn't get the job," he said. "What do you mean you didn't get the job? Did they say they'd call you back? Did they say they wanted to think about it?" "I mean, I didn't even get the interview." Marcus couldn't look at her. "I was late. They wouldn't see me." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could feel Clara staring at him, could feel her processing what he'd just said. "You were late." Her voice was still quiet, but there was something dangerous underneath it now. "You were late to the most important interview you've had in months, the only real chance we've had at getting out of this nightmare. And you were late." "Clara, let me explain." "How?" Now her voice was rising. "How were you late, Marcus? You left here with plenty of time. You said you'd take the bus. Even with traffic, you should have made it. So, how the hell were you late?" Marcus took a breath. "The bus got stuck in traffic. There was an accident. Everything was completely stopped, so I got off and started walking. Running, actually. Then, how? On the way, I saw someone who needed help. A woman. Her car had broken down, and she was alone and scared, and she asked me to help her." Clara's eyes widened. "You stopped. She needed help." "You stopped." Clara's voice exploded through the apartment. "You stopped to help some random woman when you were on your way to an interview, when you were already running late. Are you out of your mind?" "She was scared," Marcus said, his own voice rising now. "She was alone on a side street and her car was broken and there was nobody else around. What was I supposed to do?" "Keep walking," Clara screamed. "You were supposed to keep walking. You were supposed to think about your wife, about your life, about your responsibilities, not some stranger." "I'm an engineer, Clara. I knew how to fix the car. It only took a few minutes." "A few minutes that cost us everything." Clara grabbed a glass from the table and threw it against the wall. It shattered pieces, flying across the floor. "Do you understand that? Do you? That was our chance. That was our way out, and you threw it away for a stranger. I couldn't just leave her there." "Yes, you could have. You absolutely could have. People leave other people all the time, Marcus. That's how the world works. You take care of yourself first, and then maybe if you have anything left over, you help others. But you don't destroy your own life for a stranger." Marcus felt something crack inside him. "Is that really what you believe? That we should only help people if it's convenient, if it doesn't cost us anything?" "Yes," Clara shouted. "Yes, that's what I believe, especially when we're barely surviving, especially when we're about to lose our apartment. God, Marcus, how can you be so stupid? How can you be so naive? I was trying to be a good person." "Well, congratulations." Clara's laugh was bitter and harsh. "You're a good person. You're such a good person that we're going to be homeless. Such a good person that I have to live in this dump because you're too kind to put your own family first. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair." Tears were streaming down Clara's face now, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. "I married an engineer. I married someone successful, someone who had ambition and drive. And look at you now. You're pathetic. You're absolutely pathetic. You choose a stranger over your own wife, and you stand there acting like you did something noble." "Clara, please." "No." She wiped her eyes angrily. "No more please. No more chances. No more watching you fail over and over while you act like your kindness makes up for your incompetence." "What are you saying?" Clara walked to the bedroom. Marcus heard drawers opening, closet doors sliding. When she came back out, she was carrying a bag half full with clothes. "I'm saying I'm done," she said, her voice cold and final. "I'm done with this, with you, with pretending that things are going to get better when we both know they won't." "Clara, don't do this." Marcus moved toward her, but she held up a hand. "Don't touch me. Don't come near me." "Where will you go?" "Anywhere." She threw more clothes into the bag. "Anywhere is better than here. My sister's place, a friend's couch. Hell, a homeless shelter would be better than staying here and watching you destroy both our lives with your pointless kindness." "I love you," Marcus said, and his voice broke on the words. Clara stopped packing. For a moment, just a moment, her expression softened slightly. Then it hardened again. "I know you do," she said quietly. "But love isn't enough, Marcus. It never was. I need someone who can provide, someone strong, someone who puts me first. And you're not that person. You proved that today." She zipped up the bag and walked to the door. Marcus wanted to stop her, to throw himself on the ground and beg to promise he'd change, to somehow make her understand. But he knew it wouldn't matter. Clara had made up her mind. Maybe she'd made it up weeks ago, months ago, and had just been waiting for the right excuse to leave. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said, her hand on the doorknob. "Clara, please, don't give up on us. On me." She looked back at him one last time. "You gave up on us the moment you stopped to help that woman. You chose her over me, over us. So don't stand there and tell me I'm giving up. This is on you." The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of the world. Marcus stood in the empty apartment, staring at the closed door, waiting for her to come back, waiting for her to realize she'd been too harsh, that they could work through this, that 8 years of marriage had to mean something. But she didn't come back. The apartment was silent, except for the sound of Marcus's ragged breathing. He walked to the couch and sat down, his head in his hands. Everything Clara had said was playing on repeat in his mind. Pathetic, stupid, naive, a failure. Was she right? Had he really thrown away their last chance for a stranger? Had his kindness really been that foolish? Marcus thought about Charlotte, about her scared eyes and shaking hands. He thought about how grateful she'd been when her car started, how relieved. If he'd kept running, she would have been stuck there alone and frightened, maybe for hours. But if he'd kept running, he would have made his interview. He might have gotten the job. His marriage might have survived. "God," he whispered into the empty room. "What did I do wrong? I was just trying to help. Why does doing the right thing have to cost so much?" The silence that answered him felt like judgment. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Marcus recognized Clara's handwriting immediately. Inside were 2 things, their wedding ring and divorce papers, with a sticky note that read, "Sign these. Let's both move on." Marcus held the ring in his palm. It was small and gold, worn from years of wearing. He remembered buying it, remembered how excited he'd been, how sure that he and Clara would build a beautiful life together. He'd been so naive. Marcus set the ring on the table and picked up the divorce papers. The legal language was cold and clinical. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets, dissolution of marriage, the end of everything he'd built, reduced to legal terms on paper. He signed the papers that night, his signature shaky but final. Then he sat in the dark apartment holding Clara's ring and let himself finally break down and cry. He'd lost his job, he'd lost his wife, he'd lost his home, his dignity, his hope. And for what? For stopping to help a stranger who didn't even know his name. For trying to be kind in a world that punished kindness. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch until dawn, watching the darkness slowly fade to gray, wondering if there was any point in going on. wondering if Clara had been right all along, that kindness was just another word for weakness, that good people finish last, that the only way to survive was to look out for yourself first. By the time the sun rose, Marcus had made a decision. He couldn't give up. Not yet. Not completely. He had to try one more time. He had to find a way to survive, even if just to prove to himself that Clara had been wrong about him. He might be down, he might be broken, but he wasn't finished. Not yet. The construction site foreman looked Marcus up and down with skeptical eyes. The morning sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the dirt lot where heavy machinery sat idle, waiting for the day's work to begin. "You ever done construction before?" The foreman was a thick-built man in his 50s, his skin weathered from years of outdoor work, his hands calloused and scarred. "No, sir," Marcus said honestly. He'd learned his lesson about embellishing the truth. "But I'm a hard worker. I'll do whatever you need." "You got an engineering degree, you said?" The foreman squinted at the resume Marcus had handed him, the same one that had been rejected by countless companies, now creased and worn from being carried around. "Yes, sir. Petroleum engineering. I worked for Continental Energy Solutions for 5 years before they went under." "So why are you here?" The foreman waved his hand at the construction site, at the half-built structures, the piles of lumber, the bags of cement. "This ain't exactly engineering work." Marcus met his eyes directly. "Because I need a job, any job. I'll carry bricks, mix cement, dig holes. Whatever you've got, I'll do it." The foreman studied him for a long moment. Marcus stood there trying to look capable despite the fact that his body was already tired from the walk here, despite the fact that his dress shoes, the only shoes he had left, were completely wrong for a construction site, despite the fact that everything about him screamed that he didn't belong here. "What happened?" the foreman asked. "How does a guy with an engineering degree end up begging for construction work?" Marcus could have lied, could have made up some story that made him sound less desperate, less broken, but he was too tired for lies. "Life happened," he said quietly. "Lost my job when the company collapsed. Couldn't find another one. Wife left me. Lost my apartment. Lost everything, really. I just need a chance to work, to survive." The foreman's expression softened slightly. "You're overqualified. You know that, right? And this work, it's hard. Physical. Not what you're used to." "I know. Pays minimum wage. No benefits for the first 90 days. "I understand. And I can't promise anything long-term. Construction work depends on contracts, on weather, on 100 things outside my control. I'll take whatever you can give me." The foreman sighed and pulled out a clipboard. "Be here at 6 tomorrow morning. Wear work boots if you got 'em. Jeans and a t-shirt. Bring water and lunch. We work until 5 with a half-hour break at noon." Marcus felt relief wash over him so intense it almost brought him to his knees. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," the foreman said. "First day will tell us if you can actually do this. A lot of guys with desk jobs think they can handle construction. Most of them are gone by lunch." "I won't be," Marcus said with a certainty he didn't entirely feel. The foreman looked at him one more time, then nodded. "We'll see. 6 a.m., don't be late." Marcus spent his last $20 on work boots from a thrift store. They were scuffed and worn, probably 2 sizes too big, but they'd have to do. He stuffed newspaper in the toes to make them fit better. That first morning, he was at the site at 5:30. The sky was still dark stars fading as dawn approached. Marcus stood by the gate, his new boots feeling strange on his feet, his borrowed work clothes hanging loose on his frame. He'd lost weight over the past months. Stress and skipped meals had carved away at him, leaving him thinner, harder, more angular. Other workers started arriving around 5:45. They looked at Marcus with open curiosity and barely concealed skepticism. He was the new guy, the outsider, the one who clearly didn't belong. "You the engineer?" one of them asked a younger guy with tattoos covering both arms. Word traveled fast, apparently. "Yeah, Marcus Thompson. I'm Jake." The young man didn't offer to shake hands. "Foreman says you're starting today." "No offense, man, but you don't look like you can handle this work." "I'll manage," Marcus said. Jake shrugged. "We'll see. Just try not to slow the rest of us down." The work started the moment the sun came up. The foreman assigned Marcus to a crew that was laying foundation for a new apartment complex. His job was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Move cinder blocks from the delivery pile to where the masons needed them. Each block weighed about 35 pounds. The delivery pile was 50 yards from the building site. Marcus had to carry 2 blocks at a time, walking back and forth, while the sun climbed higher and the temperature rose. By 9 o'clock, his arms were shaking. By 10, his back was screaming. By 11, he had blisters on his hands, despite wearing borrowed work gloves. "You okay?" Jake asked during a water break. He didn't sound mocking anymore, just genuinely curious. "I'm fine," Marcus said, even though he wasn't. Even though every muscle in his body was rebelling, demanding that he stop, that he admit this was too much. But he couldn't stop. He wouldn't, because if he couldn't do this, if he couldn't even manage basic construction work, then what was left? Where else could he go? What else could he possibly do? So he kept going. He carried blocks until his hands bled through the gloves. He hauled bags of cement until his shoulders felt like they might dislocate. He dug trenches until his back bent and refused to straighten. At noon, when everyone else sat down to eat their lunches, Marcus collapsed in the shade of the building. He'd forgotten to bring food. It hadn't even occurred to him that morning. "Here." Jake tossed him half a sandwich. "You look like you're about to pass out." "Thanks," Marcus managed. His hands shook as he unwrapped it. "You know," Jake said, biting into his own lunch, "most guys quit by now. Especially guys like you, guys with degrees and office experience. They think construction's easy until they actually try it." "I can't afford to quit," Marcus said simply. "Nobody can, but most people still do." Jake studied him. "What's your story, man? Why are you really here?" Marcus told him. Not everything, not the part about helping Charlotte, not the specific details of how Clara had left, but enough. About losing his job, about the months of searching, about hitting rock bottom and finding out there was still farther to fall. Jake listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, he nodded slowly. "That's rough, man, but at least you're fighting. That counts for something." "Does it?" Marcus wasn't sure anymore. "Yeah," Jake said, "it does. Trust me." The afternoon was somehow worse than the morning. The sun was directly overhead, turning the construction site into an oven. The work didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. The foreman wanted the foundation finished by end of day, which meant everyone had to push harder, move faster. Marcus pushed through the pain. When his vision started to blur from exhaustion, he splashed water on his face and kept going. When he thought his legs might give out, he leaned against a wall for 30 seconds and then forced himself back to work. By 5 o'clock, when the foreman finally called it, Marcus could barely walk to his bus stop. His entire body was one massive bruise of pain, but he'd made it through the day. "Not bad," the foreman said, handing him a timesheet to sign. "You'll be back tomorrow." "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "Good. You're slow and you've got no technique, but you didn't quit. That's more than I can say for most." It became a routine. Wake up at 5. Walk to the site. Marcus couldn't afford the bus every day, so he walked the 3 miles, saving the fare for days when he was running late or the weather was bad. Work until 5. Walk home. Collapse. Sleep. Repeat. The work never got easier, but Marcus got stronger. His hands developed calluses. His muscles adapted. He learned techniques from the other workers, how to lift without destroying his back, how to pace himself, how to survive the heat. He learned other things too. Learned that most of the guys on the crew had their own stories of hardship and loss. Learned that Jake was putting himself through community college at night. Learned that the foreman had once been a high school teacher before budget cuts eliminated his position. Learned that everyone was fighting their own battles, carrying their own weight. The pay was terrible. After taxes, Marcus barely made enough to cover rent on a tiny studio apartment he'd found in the worst part of town. Food was a luxury he could rarely afford. Most days he ate one real meal, whatever was cheapest at the convenience store near the site. But it was honest work. And after months of rejection, after being told over and over that he wasn't good enough, wasn't professional enough, wasn't wanted, there was something deeply satisfying about ending each day having accomplished something tangible. He could see what he'd built, what his effort had created. At night alone in his studio apartment with its water-stained ceiling and broken heater, Marcus would sit on his mattress on the floor and think about Charlotte. He wondered if she'd closed her deal that day. He wondered if she ever thought about the man who'd helped her. He wondered if she had any idea what her broken-down car had cost him. But he tried not to be bitter about it, tried not to regret his choice, because even now, even after everything he'd lost, Marcus couldn't quite bring himself to wish he'd left her stranded. She'd been scared and alone, and he'd helped her. Maybe that had been stupid. Maybe Clara had been right that kindness was a luxury he couldn't afford. But it was who he was. And if he lost that, if he became the kind of person who could walk past someone in need, then what would be the point of surviving anyway? 3 weeks into the construction job, Marcus received an envelope in the mail. Inside were the signed divorce papers and a brief note from Clara's lawyer. It was official now. 8 years of marriage dissolved. Over. Done. Marcus put the papers in a drawer and went to bed early. He had to be up at 5 for work. 6 weeks after Marcus started at the construction site, the crew was transferred to a new project, a massive development on the north side of the city luxury apartments, the foreman explained. Government-subsidized housing for low-income families designed to look upscale. A big contract, lots of work, potentially months of steady employment. Marcus didn't care about the details. He just cared that his job was secure for a while longer. The new site was enormous. Multiple buildings in various stages of construction, heavy machinery, everywhere, hundreds of workers from different companies, all working on different aspects of the project. It was chaos, but organized chaos, everyone moving with purpose. Marcus's crew was assigned to one of the partially completed buildings. Their job was finishing the interior work, drywall, flooring, basic fixtures. It was different from the foundation work Marcus had been doing, but he adapted. He was good at adapting now. Good at doing whatever was needed without complaint. The days fell into the same rhythm as before. Wake up, work, survive, sleep, repeat. Then on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into the new site, everything changed. Marcus was mixing mortar in a large plastic tub, his shirt already soaked with sweat, despite the early hour. The work was mindless. Rhythmic add water stir, add more cement powder stir again. It gave him time to think, which wasn't always a good thing. He was thinking about Clara, about their wedding day when she'd looked at him like he was everything she'd ever wanted, about their first apartment, how they'd laughed while trying to assemble furniture from confusing instructions, about the moment he'd known the marriage was really over when she'd looked at him with contempt instead of love. "Excuse me, are these the plans for Building C?" The voice was female, cultured, confident, the kind of voice that belonged to someone important, someone with authority. Marcus didn't look up. Important people didn't talk to construction workers unless they needed something, and whatever they needed, it wasn't from him. "Building C is that way, ma'am," Jake called out from nearby. "This is Building A." "Oh, thank you. And where can I find the site supervisor?" "Foreman's office is in that trailer, the blue one." "Perfect. Thank you so much." Marcus continued mixing mortar, his mind already drifting back to memories he couldn't quite let go of. He didn't register the footsteps approaching him. Didn't register that someone had stopped, was standing nearby, was staring. "Marcus." The voice was tentative now, uncertain, and something about it made Marcus freeze his mixing stick, suspended in the gray paste. He knew that voice. Marcus looked up slowly, and his world tilted sideways. Charlotte Whitmore stood 5 feet away, wearing an expensive navy suit, her blonde hair pulled back, her eyes wide with shock. She looked exactly the same as she had that morning on the side street, polished, professional, successful. Everything Marcus used to be and wasn't anymore. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other, the construction site noise fading into background static. "It is you," Charlotte breathed. "I can't believe, what are you doing here?" Marcus became acutely aware of how he must look. Covered in dust and sweat, mixing mortar in a plastic tub, wearing clothes that had seen better days. He was a construction worker, and she was whatever she was. Someone important enough to inspect this massive development project. Someone who existed in a completely different world. "Working," Marcus said simply. He set down the mixing stick and stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I work here." Charlotte's eyes moved over him, taking in every detail. Her expression was confused, concerned, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. "But you're an engineer," she said. "You told me that day. You fixed my car. You clearly understood complex systems. This," she gestured at the construction site, "this doesn't make sense." "Life doesn't always make sense," Marcus said. He could feel the other workers watching now, curious about why some fancy lady was talking to Thompson. "Can we talk?" Charlotte asked. "Privately." Marcus glanced at the mortar he'd been mixing, then at Jake, who nodded. "Go ahead, man. I'll cover for you." Marcus led Charlotte away from the building to a quieter area near the fence that surrounded the site. His heart was pounding, though he couldn't quite say why. Embarrassment, maybe, or residual anger at how that morning had turned out. or just the surreal feeling of these two parts of his life before and after colliding. "I've thought about you so many times," Charlotte said once they were alone. "That morning when you helped me, I wanted to thank you properly, but you left before I could get your information. I've felt guilty about it for weeks, worrying that I'd made you late for something important." Marcus almost laughed. "Made him late. That was one way to put it. You did make me late," he said. "But that's not your fault. I made a choice to stop and help you." "What were you late for, your interview?" "Yeah." "Did they reschedule? Did you explain what happened?" Marcus shook his head. "They wouldn't see me. Said being late showed I was unprofessional, incompetent, not the kind of person they wanted." Charlotte's face went pale. Oh my God, Marcus, I'm so sorry. If I'd known." "It's okay," Marcus said, even though it wasn't. "You needed help. I helped you. That's all there is to it." "But your interview is long over." Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. He'd learned not to feel too much about what had happened. Feeling too much made it impossible to function. It was for Metro Pro Chemicals. Would have been a good job. Senior petroleum engineer. But I missed it, and that was that. Charlotte looked like she might cry. "Because of me. You lost that opportunity because you stopped to help me." "Yeah." What else was there to say? "What happened after that? How did you end up—" She gestured vaguely at the construction site, and Marcus found himself telling her everything. Maybe because he was tired of carrying it alone. Maybe because she was part of the story, and she deserved to know how it ended. Maybe because talking to someone from his old life, his real life, made him remember that he used to be more than this. He told her about going home to Clara, about her rage and contempt, about her leaving, about the divorce papers, about losing everything he'd built, about months of searching for engineering work and finding nothing but rejection, about finally accepting that he had to do something, anything, to survive, about ending up here carrying blocks and mixing mortar for minimum wage. Charlotte listened without interrupting. As Marcus talked, he watched her face shift through emotions, shock, guilt, sadness, anger. When he finished, they stood in silence for a long moment. "Your wife left you," Charlotte said quietly, "because you helped me. She left because she thought I was a failure. Helping you was just the final proof." "She's wrong." Charlotte's voice was fierce now. "You're not a failure. You're the opposite of a failure. You're one of the most decent people I've ever met." Marcus shrugged. "Decency doesn't pay rent." "No, but it should count for something." Charlotte pulled a business card from her purse. "This is my card. I want you to call me tomorrow morning. Please." Marcus looked at the card. Charlotte Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Industries. He almost laughed. Of course she was a CEO. Of course the woman whose car he'd fixed had turned out to be rich and powerful. The universe really had a sense of humor. "I don't need charity," he said. "It's not charity." Charlotte pressed the card into his hand. "It's justice. You lost an opportunity because you helped me. The least I can do is give you another one." "I appreciate the thought, but—" "Marcus." Charlotte grabbed his arm, her eyes intense. "Please, let me do this. I've been thinking about you for weeks, hoping you didn't suffer too much for helping me. Now I find out you lost everything. Your job, your wife, your whole life. I can't just walk away knowing that." "I won't." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to maintain his pride, his independence, but the truth was he was barely surviving, and Charlotte was offering him something he didn't know what exactly, but something that might change everything. "Okay," he heard himself say. "I'll call you tomorrow." Charlotte's relief was visible. "Thank you. Call me at 9. We'll talk then." She walked away back toward the site office, and Marcus stood there holding her business card, his hands still dusty from mixing mortar. Jake appeared at his elbow. "Dude, who was that?" "Someone I helped once," Marcus said. "Must have been some help. She looked at you like you saved her life." "Just fixed her car," Marcus said, but even as he said it, he wondered, had saving her meeting that day been like saving her life? And if so, did that mean he deserved something in return, or was kindness supposed to be its own reward, requiring nothing back? He didn't know. He just knew that Charlotte's card felt heavy in his pocket for the rest of the day, full of possibility and hope, and things that scared him more than another day of construction work. Marcus called Charlotte at exactly 9 the next morning from a payphone near the construction site. His cell phone had been shut off weeks ago, just another bill he couldn't afford. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus?" "Yeah, it's me." "I'm so glad you called. Can you meet me at my office this morning?" Marcus looked down at his work clothes, at his dusty boots. "I'm supposed to be at work." "Call in. Tell them it's an emergency. Please, Marcus, this is important." Something in her voice convinced him. Marcus called the foreman, made up an excuse about a family emergency, and got the address of Whitmore Industries from Charlotte. The building was downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place Marcus used to visit for business meetings in his old life. Now, walking through the gleaming lobby in his construction clothes, he felt completely out of place. The security guard looked at him with suspicion until Charlotte came down to meet him personally. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading him to a private elevator. "I know this must be strange." "Little bit," Marcus admitted. Charlotte took him up to the executive floor and into her office. It was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city modern furniture, original artwork on the walls. This was the office of someone who'd made it, who'd succeeded beyond most people's wildest dreams. "Sit," Charlotte said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "Can I get you anything coffee water?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, though he wasn't. He was nervous and confused, and still half convinced this was some kind of elaborate setup for humiliation. Charlotte sat down across from him, her hands folded on the desk. "I didn't sleep last night. I kept thinking about what you told me about everything you lost because you stopped to help me. It's not right, Marcus. It's not fair." "Life's not fair," Marcus said. "I've learned that." "Maybe not, but sometimes we can make it fairer." Charlotte pulled out her phone and made a call. "David, can you come to my office? I have someone I want you to meet." 5 minutes later, a man in his 60s entered the office. He was tall, distinguished, with gray hair and sharp eyes. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades in positions of power. "Marcus Thompson, this is David Richardson. He's the CEO of Whitmore Petroleum and Chemical, one of our subsidiary companies." Marcus stood and shook David's hand, feeling acutely aware of how grimy his own hand was compared to David's perfectly manicured one. "Charlotte told me about you," David said, his voice warm despite his formal appearance. "She told me what you did for her and what it cost you. I have to say, I'm impressed." "I just helped someone who needed it," Marcus said uncomfortably. "Exactly." David sat down and gestured for Marcus to do the same. "Charlotte showed me your resume last night. MIT graduate, 5 years at Continental Energy Solutions. Impressive projects. Efficiency improvements that saved your company millions. You're clearly talented." "Was talented," Marcus corrected. "That was a long time ago." "Talent doesn't disappear," David said. "And from what Charlotte tells me, you're also the kind of person who stops to help someone even when it costs you everything. That's rare. That's valuable." Marcus didn't know what to say. He just sat there waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting to find out what they really wanted from him. "We have an opening," David continued. "Technical Operations Manager at Whitmore Petroleum. It's a senior position. Good salary, full benefits, company car. The works." Marcus's heart started pounding. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you an interview," David corrected gently. "But I've already reviewed your credentials, and assuming you can demonstrate that your skills are still sharp, I'm prepared to make an offer." "I don't understand," Marcus said. "Why? Why would you do this?" Charlotte leaned forward. "Because you deserve it, because you're qualified, and because you sacrificed your own opportunity to help someone else. That's not something we want to punish, Marcus. That's something we want to reward. But Marcus struggled to find words. "I've been out of engineering for almost a year. I'm not the same person I was." "Maybe you're better," David said. "You've seen the bottom. You've done physical labor. You understand what real work is. Those are things that can't be taught in a classroom." He pulled out a folder. "I had HR put together a technical assessment, basic engineering principles, problem solving, that sort of thing. If you can pass it, the job is yours." Marcus took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were pages of engineering problems, thermodynamics, chemical processes, efficiency calculations, things he used to do in his sleep. "Can I have some time?" he asked. "Take all afternoon," David said. "Charlotte's assistant will set you up in a conference room with whatever you need. Come back when you're finished." The next 4 hours were the most intense of Marcus's life. He sat alone in a quiet conference room, working through problems he hadn't thought about in months. At first, his mind felt rusty slow. But gradually, like a muscle, remembering how to move, the knowledge came back. The formulas, the principles, the way of thinking that had made him good at his job in the first place. It was like coming home. By the time Marcus finished, the sun was starting to set. He walked back to Charlotte's office and handed David the completed assessment. David flipped through it quickly, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled. "When can you start?" Marcus stared at him. "I passed." "You didn't just pass. You scored perfectly. These problems were designed to be challenging, and you worked through them like they were simple arithmetic." David stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to Whitmore Petroleum, Mr. Thompson. I think you're going to do great things here." Marcus shook his hand, still hardly believing this was happening. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll start Monday," Charlotte said, smiling. "And Marcus, there's a company apartment in the building downtown. Temporary housing for executives who are relocating. It's yours until you get settled. And the company car will be ready Monday morning," David added, "along with your employee packet ID badge and everything else you'll need." It was too much. After months of having nothing, of being nothing, suddenly he had everything again. Marcus felt dizzy, overwhelmed, like the universe had shifted beneath his feet. "Why?" he asked again. "Why are you doing this? It can't just be because I fixed Charlotte's car." Charlotte and David exchanged a glance. Then Charlotte spoke. "That morning, when you helped me, I was on my way to the most important meeting of my career, a deal that would expand Whitmore Industries into 3 new markets. A deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If my car had stayed broken, if I'd missed that meeting, I would have lost everything I'd been working toward for years." She paused, her eyes meeting Marcus's directly. "You saved me that day, Marcus. You saved my deal, my company's future, my career. And you did it without knowing who I was or what was at stake. You did it just because someone needed help." Charlotte's voice was thick with emotion. "So no, this isn't charity. This is me paying a debt I'll never be able to fully repay." Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes. He'd spent so long thinking his kindness had been a mistake, that helping Charlotte had ruined his life, but maybe, just maybe, it had actually saved it. "Thank you," he whispered. "Both of you. Thank you." 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new office on the 15th floor of Whitmore Petroleum's headquarters. Not a huge office, but it was his, with his name on the door and a window that looked out over the city. He'd been promoted twice already. His projects were saving the company money and improving efficiency across multiple divisions. David had started bringing him into executive meetings, asking for his input on major decisions. Marcus was rebuilding everything he'd lost piece by piece. The apartment Charlotte had given him had turned permanent. The company car had become a given. He had savings again, stability again, a future that looked bright instead of bleak. His phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Hey man, saw your picture on the company website. Technical Operations Manager. Damn good for you. Drinks sometime." Marcus smiled and texted back. "Definitely. You free this weekend?" He kept in touch with Jake and a few of the other guys from the construction site. They'd been there for him when he had nothing, and he wouldn't forget that. Wouldn't forget where he'd been or how easily everything could fall apart. A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus looked up to see Charlotte standing there holding 2 coffee cups. "Got a minute?" she asked. "For you always." Charlotte handed him a coffee and sat down across from his desk. "I have a proposition. We're expanding into renewable energy, wind farms, solar installations, the whole works. David and I want you to head up the technical side of the operation." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "That's a massive undertaking." "I know. That's why we need someone brilliant, someone who can think creatively and solve complex problems, someone who doesn't give up when things get hard." Charlotte smiled. "Someone like you." "I'd be honored," Marcus said. They talked details for a while, timeline, budget, staffing. When Charlotte finally left, Marcus sat back in his chair and looked out the window at the city spread below him. That's when he saw her. Clara was standing on the sidewalk below, looking up at the building. Even from 15 floors up, Marcus recognized her immediately. She was dressed nicely, her hair done, looking like the woman he'd married instead of the bitter stranger who'd left him. His phone rang a minute later, the receptionist downstairs. "Mr. Thompson, there's a Clara Thompson here to see you. She says she's your wife." "Ex-wife," Marcus corrected gently. "Send her up." He could have refused, could have told the receptionist he was too busy, could have avoided this confrontation entirely. But Marcus had learned something over the past months. Running from difficult things only made them harder later. Clara knocked tentatively on his office door 5 minutes later. When Marcus opened it, she looked at him with an expression he remembered from years ago, admiration mixed with affection. "Marcus," she breathed, "I saw your picture online. I saw you'd gotten a position here. I had to see if it was really true." "It's true," Marcus said. He didn't invite her in, just stood in the doorway. "I made a mistake," Clara said, tears forming in her eyes. "Walking away from you. I was angry and scared, and I said terrible things. But I never stopped loving you." Marcus looked at her. This woman he'd loved, who'd shared his life, who'd left when things got hard. He felt sadness, but not anger. Understanding, but not forgiveness. "You left me when I needed you most," he said quietly. "You called my kindness foolish. You said I was pathetic for helping someone who needed it. I was wrong." Clara reached for his hand, but Marcus pulled back. "I was so wrong, Marcus. Please, give me another chance. Let me make this right." For a moment, Marcus was tempted. It would be so easy to say yes, to go back to what they'd had, to forgive and forget and pretend the past year hadn't happened. But it had happened, and it had changed him, changed what he wanted and who he wanted to be. "No, Clara," he said gently. "Some things can't be rebuilt. We can't go back to who we were. But you're successful again. We could have the life we always wanted. I'm successful because I stayed true to who I am, because I help people even when it costs me. That's what led me here. And you wanted me to be someone different, someone harder, someone who puts himself first." Marcus shook his head. "I can't be that person. Even if I tried, I couldn't." Clara was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Please, Marcus, I love you." "I loved you too," Marcus said. Past tense. "And I forgive you for leaving. I understand why you did. But forgiveness doesn't mean we should try again." He pulled the signed divorce papers from his desk drawer and handed them to her. "You wanted a better life. I hope you find it, Clara. I really do. Just not with me." Clara took the papers with shaking hands. "If you change your mind." "I won't," Marcus said, not unkindly. "Goodbye, Clara. Take care of yourself." He closed the door gently and returned to his desk. Through the window, he watched Clara exit the building. A few minutes later, her shoulders slumped, defeated. Marcus felt sad, but also relieved. That chapter of his life was finally truly closed. His phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. "Dinner tomorrow. Want to discuss the renewable energy project in more detail. My treat." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Sounds perfect." He thought about that morning on the side street when he'd made the choice to stop and help. He thought about everything that choice had cost him and everything it had ultimately given him. Clara had been wrong. Kindness wasn't foolish. Kindness was the bravest thing a person could do. And sometimes, if you were lucky, the universe found a way to reward it. Marcus turned back to his computer, to the work that had saved him, and started planning for a future that finally felt bright. He'd been broken, but he'd rebuilt himself. He'd lost everything, but he'd found something better. And he'd learned that the man who stops to help someone in need, even when it costs him everything, is never truly defeated. Because that kind of man always finds his way home.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.